Let's read fantasy for a week.
Discovering that fantasy books are so fun to read in adulthood might have been even more fun than discovering romance, which is a big statement for me. And another really fun thing about fantasy is how many subgenres there are. We've got high fantasy, historical fantasy, urban fantasy, romance fantasy. So I thought I would just dedicate this entire week to reading a few books that have been on my list for a while now. Starting off, I've gotten so many comments saying Brandon Sanderson is king of fantasy and I need to read a book by him. So I picked up Mistborn. It's actually a trilogy, I believe, and this first one is 659 pages. I think it's under the category of young adult high fantasy. The back just says, a hero rose to save the world. He failed. For 1,000 years since, the world has been a wasteland of ash and mist, ruled by the immortal emperor oh my gosh. Ruled by the immortal emperor known as the Lord Ruler. Okay, if you've ever read Six of Crows, it's not a heist necessarily, but there's a little group of characters coming together to try to take over the empire. And the magic system is really cool. It has something to do with metals. They don't fly, but they like push and pull against metal, which is pretty sick. I am this far into the book, which is actually 200 pages, but it's only been 2 days and I've read that many pages without even really thinking about it. So I'm not obsessed with it or anything, but I feel like I've been reading at a pretty quick pace just on accident. So that's a pretty good sign that it's gonna be a good book. I'm very excited to enter a Brandon Sanderson universe for the first time in my entire life. Read my first Stephen King book, now reading my first Brandon Sanderson. These are just some very popular authors that I've never read any books by. So I'm gonna try to get quite a big chunk of reading done today. I would love to get like 200 pages read today. That would be sick. That would be like this much. Would you look at that lighting? Wow. I took Moose, aka Spock, on a walk and we're back and I'm on page 226 now and I'm watching Lavender Cashew Milk Latte on YouTube. It's a different day. I got to page 336 in Mistborn, so I'm like a good halfway through. But I actually went on a week-long trip to New Jersey, filmed a collab video, read 2 other books, and then flew home. And I didn't bring this book because it would legitimately hurt my back to travel with. So this book is also thick, but I ended up bringing this, and that is Heart of the Raven Prince by Tashonja Odette. It's a Cinderella retelling with Faye in it. Actually, I kind of forgot that there are fae in this book. It doesn't really feel like that much. But Sarah Caroli gave this book 5 stars and it's like a cute little fantasy romance, so it's not super fantasy heavy or anything. It's more so like it really does just feel like a magical fairy tale Cinderella retelling. And I read this on the plane, so I got 320 pages through this one. So I am now 300 pages through 2 fantasy books. This one I have like 100 pages left of. This one I have another 300 to go through. But something that I'm realizing that I really like in fantasy books is when they go to a ball. I love that. And I was very shocked, but she goes to balls in Mistborn, which is so shocking, and it's written very well. I don't know if we're getting a romance in this book at all, but I feel like I'm getting some romance vibes when she goes to the ball, which is so shocking. I was not expecting that from Brandon Sanderson. This one is obviously high fantasy, so it's more politics and everything, and then this one is more so just like cutesy romance, very fast to read. So I think I'm just gonna focus on finishing this book so that I can then just focus on one book at a time, because this is a little bit overwhelming. I usually don't read multiple fiction books at one time. I am still very much in a fantasy mood, so I'm very excited to still just be reading fantasy this week. Okay, I got a haircut since the last clip. It's been a few days since I curled it, so we have messy hair day look. But I finished Heart of a Raven Prince by Tashonja Odette. I love how different fantasy books can be, because these are both in the fantasy category, but this one is very much fairy tale, easy to read, not much world building, not much. I mean, the plot is based off of Cinderella for this one, so it's a story we already know. It doesn't really take that much brain power, and then we've got some fae, but there's not really like a magic system or anything. It's more so about a romance story with a whimsical backdrop type of thing, and I usually love that. One of my favorite fantasy books of all time is Once Upon a Broken Heart or the Cruel Prince trilogy, and those are both very whimsical, fairy-like backgrounds, but it's, well, okay, Cruel Prince is not about romance, but this one is. So I was hoping this would be in the same category, and unfortunately, so much of it just fell flat for me, and I don't really know why. I was trying to listen to the Taylor Swift instrumentals. I was really trying to get into it, especially because my friend Sarah gave it 5 stars, and we usually have very similar book taste, but I'm gonna give this one a 3-star. Even at the end, when some very intense parts were happening and they were supposed to be serious, they were making me laugh, which is just like the most unfortunate event that could happen when you're reading a book and you know what emotion is supposed to be happening and you're having the opposite. So I don't really know what went wrong for me here. 3 is still pretty good. Like, I can understand why other people have rated this high because I feel like this has all the ingredients for me to rate it high and I just didn't for some reason. So on to finishing Mistborn. I've got like this much left. I've been reading Mistborn over the past few days. Remember when I said, I don't know if there's gonna be romance in this book, right at around, I feel like the 400, am I remembering correctly? Maybe 450 pages, but definitely subplot, minute, tiny 2% of the book. But it's still, I feel like I almost like that better in books when it's like a barely even there plot because they're so busy doing other things, but it's still like in the back of your mind, like this could come up later in the series. I love when that happens, and that's what this book did. Also, I realized I never tried to explain what this book is about because it's difficult. Basically, we're living in this world where there's super high class nobility, and then we have the ska, I think is how you say it, and they're all slaves, and you just have 2 groups of people. So then we're following mostly 2 characters, but a cast of like maybe 6 characters who are trying to team up and take over the ruling force of this world so that they don't have to be enslaved anymore. And then there's that magic system that I tried to talk about a little bit. So my first Brandon Sanderson done. He is obviously massive in the fantasy world, so I feel like I couldn't do this video without reading that. And I'm so excited that I finally have the first one under my belt because there's this whole thing called the Cosmere, which a ton of his books take place in. And a lot of people say that Mistborn is a great place to start entering that world. This is a trilogy, so I'm considering picking up the second book very soon. Maybe not on this video. I am going to rate this book 4 stars, which feels low. Like, the more that I think about it, the more I feel like it's a 4.5. Just considering the universe that I feel like I'm about to enter, like I can very much see myself reading the second book and then being obsessed with the series and then maybe going back and appreciating this more. But I'm only saying that now because there were some parts of the story that were really boring to me and were just kind of like building up the world and making you empathize with certain characters. So I feel like it was necessary, but it was a little bit boring. But then there were other parts of the story that were just amazing, and I love the character development that you get to follow. Like, the last line in this book was so cute. I need to read it again. Why is it like making me want to cry? Okay, you really do get attached. Like, I feel like if I read the second book, I will be a mess if something happens to these characters. Okay, yeah. Wait, why does the last line of this book makes me teary-eyed? I really like the way that he writes characters. So I definitely want to continue this trilogy. And it is such an accomplishment to finish books like this because this was like 659 pages. And now it's time to choose our next fantasy read. Okay. Oh, I've been reading Clockwork Prince by Cassandra Clare. This is the second book in the Infernal Devices series, so I read the first one a couple months ago, gave it 4 stars. I like it. I like the world, and this is the one where we finally get to see the romance stuff happening. I want to read this series so bad so that I can read the new books that have been coming out because everyone has been freaking out about it, and the fan base for the Shadowhunter series, which is like 20 books and so confusing, and I don't know what order to read it in. It has a massive fan base, so I started with this trilogy, which is called The Infernal Devices, but there is another series called The Mortal Instruments that some people say to read. I don't know. I got like 150 pages in and I was pretty bored to the point where I was a little bit worried, and I was like, maybe I should DNF this. Maybe it's because I didn't read the Mortal Instruments series first that I'm not as invested. And then I kept reading 50 more pages and we got more of the romance plot happening in this book. And I did some reading in San Diego because I was on a bachelorette trip. Hey, I'm on a bachelorette trip right now, but I'm reading Clockwork Prince by Cassandra Clare, but I just got to 200 pages and there is a love triangle in the series that we did not get to see at all in the first book, and it's finally coming out, and now it's getting fun, and I understand their goals and everything, so it's getting good. But I'm back home now, and I only have like 70 pages left today, so I'm gonna try to finish it up right now. I finished Clockwork Prince. I've had a few days in between finishing it, which is actually very important for me reading books. I feel like is to wait a few days before I really understand how I feel, because sometimes I'll read a book, think I really like it, and then I'll never think about it again. And then I'm like, oh, must have not liked it that much. And then sometimes I think that a book was like 4 stars, and then I'll just continue to think about it for so long that I'm like, okay, maybe I was a bit more attached to those characters than I thought. And this one kind of falls under that category because at the start I was bored for like 150 pages. I kind of had forgot the dynamics and the characters from the first book and was a little bit confused about what their mission was. And then the love triangle stuff started happening at around really like page 200, and there's actually quite a heavier romance subplot in this book, and that's really the only thing that was keeping me going through the book. But the thing is, it's written so well, the quotes are so cute, but I just don't think I liked anything in the book other than the romance, which makes me feel like it's not that good then, but then the romance was really good, so it kind of outweighs. But I've thought about these characters for so long, and I do want to read the third one. So I feel like I was gonna give it like a 3.5, but I feel like I'm gonna give it a 4, and I think I'm definitely gonna pick up the sequel to it. Same with Mistborn. Like I said, thought it was gonna be a 4-star, but I really haven't stopped thinking about the characters, and I really want to go pick up the next book, even though it's so long. And then Heart of a Raven Prince was just a little bit of a fail for me for whatever reason. But we got 2 4-star books. Seems like kind of a trend though, where I'll rate fantasy books 4 stars, and it does make me question like how much I like this genre. But then there are some fantasy books that I really, really love and I give 5 stars, so maybe I'm just a bit pickier when it comes to fantasy 5 stars. Please let me know some of your favorites. Fantasy is definitely in my top 3 genres. So thanks for reading fantasy with me this week. I'm gonna see you guys somewhere else on the internet, such as my Instagram, perhaps such as my vlog channel. But if not, love ya!